Wow, it's great to be in the state of Florida. I came from Tennessee at 3:15 this morning, or actually somewhere around. That's when I woke up. So it's great to be with you. Everybody, I'm going to teach you some Hebrew words. Everybody up for that? Anybody know Hebrew? Everybody say Chag. C-H-A-G. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. It means happy holiday, because last night was Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is Israel's Independence Day. Israel just turned 76 years old. Of course, we know Israel's more like 4,000 years old, so 76 is just their modern age. But before I get started, I have to tell you guys, and thank you so much. I want to thank Natalie for arranging this, the Freedom Praise team, the Freedom Fellowship team for having us here, everybody, Ryan and his family, Adam and Jessica. Thank you guys so much. It's a blessing to be here. My children, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones, are passing out some rack cards for you guys. One is all about what we do in Israel. The other one is about our upcoming summit in Nashville, Tennessee, starting Monday. So if anybody gets the urge to jump on a plane or drive, I'm driving, so you can follow me if you want. We're going to have a 3-day conference in Tennessee. Now, I have to tell you, in case you haven't seen the news, I'm not going to say Tennessee. Anti-Israel activists tried to shut down this historic gathering in Nashville, Tennessee. And they succeeded far enough to where our venue canceled on us on Friday, less than 10 days before the beginning of our event. They canceled our venue. They canceled all of the guest rooms, over 100 guest rooms that we had booked, and we were high and dry. And we were looking at, screenshots from social media of dozens, if not hundreds, of activists determined to shut us down. Now, obviously, that left us scrambling, and in the last couple of days, it's all over the nation and the media. Because why? And why is this important? You think, obviously, it's terrible for us, but it's just a private event. Who cares? And obviously, they have the right. It's a private venue, right? Why? But why is this important? What's been happening on college campuses across the United States for the last month? Pro-Palestinian protests, not just pro-Palestinian protests, pro-Hamas protests, pro-Iranian protests. And I'll tell you why that's true in just a second. So this is the result of those protests, because those who hate God and the Jewish people and the land of Israel, and hate pro-Israel Christians, by the way, have decided that they're allowed to gather peacefully, they're allowed to protest, they're allowed to have their voices heard, they're allowed to have freedom of speech, but we're not. And we just thankfully were surrounded by some very good people, and we said, no, you're not going to shut us down. So we told everybody, even before we had a venue, we said, there's no way this is not happening. Everybody, keep your tickets. We're coming to Nashville. The singer, Yair Levy, you guys may have heard of, who's bringing his band to do a concert. He put a video on Instagram. He said, even if I'm standing in the park alone, I'm coming to Nashville, and I'm going to sing on May 21st. And the good news is, yesterday at noon, Dave Ramsey called our team, and he said, I'm making my brand new event center available for your venue. I'm moving my own event to a different location just so you guys can use this. It's a brand new state-of-the-art center. And we asked him this. We asked him, because we asked his team, we said, do you want us to, obviously we can't keep it a secret, but we said, do you want us to make this public? Or would you rather us just kind of, keep it a little bit under wraps? And he wrote back, I was looking for the direct quote, but basically he wrote back and he said, please tell the public that Dave Ramsey is proud to stand with his friends from Israel and make sure they have a safe place to meet. So the Israel Summit is happening Monday night through Wednesday night next week. It's happening in Tennessee, just 30 minutes south of Nashville. And now we're going to have more than 500 people gathering, hundreds of people, if not thousands, online. It's going to be a historic event. Why? Because this is the first time that we've had this is a conference not just about Israel, not just about Judea and Samaria, but it's bringing the people of Israel heavily from Judea and Samaria, the pioneers of the land of Israel, to the United States, and we're connecting these two communities for the first time ever. So it's a historic gathering. Yishai Fleischer, Ari Gimpel, Ari Abramowitz. Jeremy Gimpel was just injured. If anybody knows Jeremy, you need to pray for him. He was coming and he fell off a horse. So please pray for him. Yair Levy, member of Knesset, Ohad Tal, Caroline Glick. So it's just going to be an amazing, amazing, amazing event. So you already saw the video. And I've been speaking about Israel all over the world for a long time. I've been all across the United States multiple times. I've been across Canada. I've been in New Zealand and Australia. I've been in Australia twice. And I've always had a very, very positive, enthusiastic message about Israel. And we're going to have that message tonight. But first, there's a couple of very difficult things that have to be shared, because I was in Israel on October 7th. Ryan was in Israel on October 7th. My wife and family was there. Ryan's family was there. And if you remember where you were and what you were doing on 9/11, then you can relate to this. All of us as Americans, if you're old enough, you remember, where was I in the morning of 9/11? What was I doing? You can picture it in your head, right? By the way, who here has been to Israel before? All right, we're in the right crowd. October 7th was Israel's 9/11, except 10 times worse. Because there were 1,200 Israelis killed, over 5,000 injured, several hundred taken into captivity. And Israel is such a tiny nation, and when you compare that to what happened on September 11th, that is equivalent to 40,000 Americans being killed in one day. This is the worst tragedy to befall the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Now, I woke up on October 7th early in the morning, and I looked out my front door and I saw the military driving to our hilltop. We live next to an Orthodox Jewish community on the Mount of Blessing, same biblical Mount Gerizim, if you remember the woman at the well, right? That's where we live. Now, it's not unusual to see the IDF, but it was a little unusual, more unusual than normal this morning. And then I saw a friend of ours driving to our hilltop, which is very unusual because October 7th was a Shabbat, it was the weekly Sabbath, and it was Simchat Torah, which is the high holiday to mark the end of Sukkot, one of the most joyous holidays in all of Israel. And on these days, nobody works, businesses are closed, restaurants are closed, the news networks are closed, everybody's at home, they don't drive their cars, they're not on their cell phones, they're not on the internet. And where we live, it's an Orthodox Jewish community, so nobody drives. Nobody's on their phones at all. When I saw our friend driving from the community to our hilltop, he gets out of the car with his phone in his hand, I realized something is up. Later on, I found out that at 40-something years old, this is the first time in his life he's been in a car on Shabbat and had a phone in his hand. And as the day progressed, and first we heard the news that one person was killed, then 5 people were killed, then 10 people were killed, and eventually now we know 1,200 people murdered. We realized the severity of the situation. And at first the world stood with Israel. They had world sympathy for like 2 days. And then they had like kind of favorable coverage from the media for maybe 2 weeks. And then it flipped. And even right now, with the crazy things happening in Israel and around the world is still against Israel. Now, 3 months into the war, I had an opportunity to go to Be'eri. Be'eri, some of the footage you saw in that video was from Be'eri. There was 3 kibbutzes. There was the Nova Music Festival, and between those 4 places, about 1,200 people were killed. And we went to Be'eri in January, 3 months into the war. I did not expect to experience so much devastation because we're 3 months after the fact. But our team gets off the bus. Immediately, the ground shakes with an earth-shattering explosion. People scream. Thankfully, we immediately realize it's the IDF, not the enemy, operating in Gaza, but it's a live war zone. And then I realize the people that were going to take us around the community were not tour guides. They were people who lived there. And there were people who were there on October 7th. And I'll just tell you a couple of the stories because it's so important. Because when I stood there, I immediately knew within 2 minutes it is going to be impossible to explain what I'm experiencing to the world, and yet they have to know. So the first man that was with one of our groups, his cousin was still hostage inside Gaza, and as far as I know, he still is today. Several of his family members were killed. The man that took our group around, he and his wife and 2 children, they all survived. But they had to run into their safe room, their bomb shelter, which every Israeli has a bomb shelter, or what they call a safe room inside their house, meant to protect them from incoming rockets and shrapnel. They ran in their safe room, and then he and everyone else who were in their safe rooms had to stand inside the room and hold the door handles shut, because these rooms were not designed to keep intruders out. They were designed to protect them from shrapnel and rockets. So none of the doors locked. So he and all the other fathers in the community are standing in there holding their doors locked with a baseball bat in the other hand. They hear the terrorists come into their house. He's protecting his wife and 2 children. The terrorists are searching room to room. And then a dog barks, and the terrorists leave the house, only by a miracle of God. Otherwise, he and his family would be dead today. For 6 hours, they hid until the IDF came and rescued them. It took 4 days for the IDF to completely clear out Hamas from Be'eri. Over 100 people killed. And on the day we visited, there were people already living back in the community. The print factory, which is the largest print factory in all of Israel, was operating again at full capacity because the Jewish people's response to death and destruction is life. Their response to the land being destroyed is to rebuild. Restoration, they respond with desolation, they respond with restoration. Their enemies try to bring death, they bring life. So it's important to them that they begin living in these communities again. It's important that the factories start operating again. It's important that the farmers begin planting and plowing the fields again, which is happening right now. Along the Gaza border, farmers are plowing and planting because they're determined to make life come out of the ground in response to death. I have to tell you one last story from Be'eri because it affected me so much. And you can actually watch this story on our channel. One of the residents, a woman, took us to her father's home in the center of the community. And the home was obviously burnt, and the windows were broken and half destroyed. Everything you could tell was burnt from being set on fire. And her father's cart that he would ride around the community on, one of those electric carts, sat in front of the house, burnt to the metal frame. Just a twisted wreckage. And she told us, my father lived here, and when the sirens and the warnings went off, he refused to go inside into a safe house because he has Arab friends, and he speaks Arabic fluently. And he said, surely they're not going to harm me. I'll just talk to them. He sits down in front of his house. The Hamas comes up to him. He tries to talk to them. They immediately shoot him in both hands. He's bleeding out. He crawls back. They leave. He crawls back into his house, crawls into his safe room, calls his 2 daughters, one of whom is telling us this story. The other daughter's in Haifa, and she's telling her father, put a tourniquet on, trying to walk him through. She's a paramedic. I'm walk him through how to stop the bleeding on his arms. And the second daughter, who's telling us the story, is in a house 100 yards away. Now, in all of these kibbutzes, it was like a horrific game of hide and seek because everybody turned their phones on, and then they start calling and texting saying, there's terrorists in this house, there's terrorists in that house. Now they've left this house. Now you can run, come into this house, hide in this room. And that's going on for hours and hours and hours. So she is on the phone with her dad, and she realizes he's bleeding out. I have to get to him if I'm going to save him. She begins to climb out the second-story window, leaving her 2 children behind her. And her neighbor calls and says, you cannot come out. There's terrorists below your house. If you come out, you'll be killed. She then makes the decision, am I going to jump out a second-story window and try to run to my father's house and likely get killed in the process to save him and leave my children unprotected, or do I stay here? And ultimately, she had to make that decision to stay and protect her children. And she played us the very last words her father ever spoke that were recorded on her phone in Hebrew. And it's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. The most horrific tragedy the Jewish people have experienced since the Holocaust and the world has completely turned against them. You know, unfortunately, the U.S. administration is just one small step away from completely turning against Israel. It's like one step forward, two steps back. And lately, it's been more and more and more of that. And like I like to tell people, the Biden administration just likes to throw Israel just enough of a bone to convince them and the world that they are Israel's strongest ally, that Israel is America's strongest ally in the Middle East. And like the UN Security Council votes to make the Palestinian Authority a full member, every nation votes for it, but the United States vetoes it. That's the bone they threw. And then what do they follow up with? Iran attacks them, and America says, take the win. Don't retaliate. Ambassador David Friedman told this story to Fox News a few days later. He said, imagine a mafia gang came into Washington, D.C. and shot 20 police officers, except every bullet was caught in a bulletproof vest. Nobody died. Take the win. Why go chase down the bad guys? Take the win. Isn't that ridiculous? But the Biden administration is saying, don't retaliate against Iran. Nobody was killed in the Iran attack. And don't get me wrong, Iran tried to destroy Israel. At first, the news came out and they said Iran was just a show of force. They wanted their people and they wanted Israel and the world to know, we can hit you if we want to. That is not true. They tried to destroy Israel and the Jewish people. Our team was in Israel, and I got the text messages live. The sirens are going off. We're going into lockdown. The IDF's responding. There's bombs exploding in the air. Now, where we live, there's 4 Arab communities surrounding the mountain of the blessing where we live. They said it sounds like the Arabs are about to charge up the hill and attack. That's how loud they're screaming, because they're so excited that Iran is attacking Israel. Now, my family had our bags packed because we were leaving for the airport at 5 a.m. the next morning. And therefore, one of the reasons why we ended up staying in the United States for longer. But I realized, because it hit me hard when I saw Iran attack Israel, this has never happened before. And the last time the Persian people tried to take out the Jewish people was Esther. And we just celebrated that holiday. We just remembered that story. Iran attacking Israel directly with ballistic missiles and drones. This has never happened before in history. There's no clearer picture of the entire world turning against Israel. Now the United States is holding up a crucial arms shipment to Israel, precision missiles and bombs, so that Israel, and the way Israel's responding is they're saying, so you're telling us you want us to use the bombs that we have that are not as precise? Meaning Hamas is already hiding behind civilians, and they're determined that we're going to kill as many of them as possible. That's Hamas's goal, by the way. They want Israel to kill as many of their people as possible, and so they put their own people, women and children, in front of themselves so that Israel accidentally kills them, even though Israel does everything in their power to protect them. And now the United States is holding up precision weaponry and Hamas is celebrating, because now they know more of their people are going to die, and they don't care. They want their people to die. Yahya Sinwar, you ever heard of him? He's the leader of Hamas. He's running around in tunnels underneath Gaza like a rat. He knows he's a trapped rat, and he knows it's only a matter of time before Israel takes him out. But guess what he does? Have you ever seen a picture or video of him? Every single image you've ever seen in the media, he has a little child with him, either standing by his side or in his arms. Does anybody know why? Because he knows Israel won't take him out if he has a child at his side. How sick and twisted do you have to be to believe this ideology? You know, I recently came across an interesting statistic. During the Holocaust, there's Yad Vashem is Israel's national Holocaust memorial. Yad Vashem has a category of people that they have decided to honor, and it's called Righteous Among the Nations. Righteous Among the Nations are non-Jews who hid Jews and assisted Jews during the Holocaust, okay? Yad Vashem records 28,000 people who are considered righteous among the nations, meaning people they have honored. 28,000 people. Now I started thinking, 28,000 people who were not Jews stood with the Jewish people during the Holocaust, and 6 million Jews were killed. What if there had been more than 28,000 people? Would there have been less than 6 million killed? What if there had been less than that number? Would there have been more than 6 million? And so that's a challenge for us today, because I truly believe, like I said, the American administration is just one tiny step away from Zechariah 14. All nations are gathering against Jerusalem. Ireland has said that they're about to formally declare a Palestinian state, as if they could. A bunch of European Union nations said they're about to follow suit. European Union is having parliament elections in June. One of the crucial issues is Palestinian state. The Biden administration said they're considering formally declaring a Palestinian state. Now, we all know they don't have the power to do that. But unfortunately, symbolism many times can turn into reality. And unfortunately, Israel pays a little too much attention to what the world thinks about them. And if the United States and Ireland and the Netherlands and a bunch of other countries formally declare a Palestinian state, there is danger, depending on who is leading the government of Israel, that they could make it a reality. And this is where we come in. The challenge for us is, we've already seen pro-Israel America can be a part of changing the story. Trump actually, I don't know if you guys saw this, just about a week ago, he made a comment in an interview, and he said, you know what, I don't think the two-state solution was such a good idea. I think the Palestinian state was a failed idea. Now, I think he kind of said it flippantly. Maybe he was serious, maybe not. But what happens? Pro-Israel America gets together, Jewish rabbis, Christian pastors, organizations, churches, they get together and they sign a letter, hundreds and hundreds of leaders saying, thank you, President Trump, for saying the Palestinian state is a failed and bad idea. Thank you for standing against the two-state solution. Ambassador David Freeman sends that to Trump. Now President Trump knows pro-Israel America does not believe in a Palestinian state. And so we can be a part of changing the story. And the challenge for us today is, where are we going to stand? Because that line is becoming very, very clear. And there's no sitting on the fence. I've been saying this for years, but I mean, there's no way to sit on the fence anymore. Absolutely none. There's no gray area anymore. Either you're with Israel or you're against Israel. You're with God's kingdom or you're against God's kingdom. You believe in that covenant God made with Abraham or you don't. And I put my life on the line. My wife and 6 children, we live there in the middle of it. And so many others of my family, my friends, so many of you I'm sure as well. If you've been to Israel, then I know I'm in the right crowd. A friend of mine in Israel, his name's Gedalia, lives down the road from us. He sent a message out on a group of Christians and Jews that I'm a part of. And he said, make sure you tell our friends in America that it's not just about standing with Israel because God said so. Which I still believe is the most important reason to stand with Israel. But he said, there's another thing you need to tell them. The same people that are coming against us are coming after our friends in America. We're all people of the book. Are we all people of the book? The Jewish people are people of the book. The same people who want to eradicate the Jewish people want to eradicate us. The same enemies of Israel and the Jewish people are the enemies of all of us. They say, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. First Israel, then America. Iran says death to Israel, death to America. First the little Satan, then the big Satan. There's an old saying that says, if your enemy says he wants to kill you, believe him. Martin Niemöller had a poem he wrote a poem just after the Holocaust, which I'm sure you've heard this quote. He said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me. The time has come to throw in our lot together. And a lot of people ask me, because I'm sure if you follow the news from Israel, you saw last year there was big protests happening in Israel. A lot of people saw a divided country. Protests over social justice issues, judicial reform. I went to some of the protests. They're asking me, is it different? Has it changed since October 7th? And the answer is yes. I've never seen a more united Israel within their own country. But I've also never seen such enthusiasm for Israel and the Jewish people wanting to work with their non-Jewish friends all around the world. And I'm saying in big ways, from leaders, pastors, rabbis, organizations, ministries, churches, from mainstream Christianity churches to Hebrew roots to Messianic congregations, everybody's saying we got to work together because, like I told you, one, we're all the people of the book, and two, they're coming for all of us. We're all throwing in our lot together, and they're all saying we have to stand together. We have to work together. The time has come. Now, I told you this is still a positive and a joyous message because there's always good news from Israel, and I'll tell you that. If you watch the media, number one, don't believe all of it. And number two, the media never focuses on the positive stories. So you got to come there for yourself because there's always good news coming from Israel. When I first went to Israel, I was 16 years old. Read my Bible my whole life, knew the stories of the Bible, went to Israel, and I like to say my faith went from linear to 3D. Because all of a sudden the stories and the scripture that I read my entire life were no longer just words on a page. All of a sudden I'm standing in those places that I was reading about my whole life. I stood in a place called Alon Moreh. Anybody ever stood there? Alon Moreh, Mount Kabir. Yeah, all the guys that have been with us. Now you know, if you come to Israel, come visit us. We'll take you there. Alon Moreh is where Abraham stood in Genesis 12. And God said, look north, south, east, and west. I'm giving this land to you and your descendants forever. I stood there. I looked north. You can see Mount Hermon. I looked south. You can see the desert. You can almost see the Dead Sea. I looked west. You can see Mount of Blessing, Mount of Cursing, and see Tel Aviv. I looked east, and you can see the valley where Joshua led the 12 tribes into the land. It's my favorite spot in the entire land of Israel. The Bible came to life for me right there. You travel across the valley, you get to the Mount of Blessing, Mount of Cursing, Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal. 12 tribes come to this mountain, 6 tribes on each mountain. They read the blessings and the curses, and all the people answered and say, Amen. They said, yes, we agree. There's an altar on the Mount Ebal today that you can go visit. That's the altar that Joshua built. That's recorded in Deuteronomy. How do we know that? They found ashes for thousands of bones of kosher animals. And the altar is the exact dimension and the exact shape that's described for altars that day. You go to Mount Gerizim, where the Samaritan village still is. The exact same Samaritans from the times of Jesus, times of Yeshua. When he ministered to the woman at the well, those Samaritans still live there. And you can still go visit them. They're the only people in the world that do a Passover sacrifice. You can go watch it. Fascinating people. They also make the best tahina in the world. If you don't know what that is, you got to come to Israel. The road of the patriarchs, the biblical highway. Because you travel down this highway and you're driving on a paved road where Jesus and his disciples walked. You're walking the same road that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob walked. I'm dead serious. Same road for the past 4,000 years, except it has asphalt on it. And now they've passed a budget to expand it to 6 lanes. So that's good news for us. Everywhere you toss a rock is a place straight out of the Bible, because Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, not the West Bank, not the occupied territories, because words and terminology matters. Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria is where more than 80% of the Bible was written or occurred. And it's also where every single one of the covenants were made or ratified with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, except for one given to Isaac. Guess where that one is? In Gaza. The physical words and the promises God made are connected to the physical land of Israel, and they're also the hottest pieces of real estate in the entire world, because the enemies of God knows that if they can eradicate God's word and make it not true, then they win. And so they're fiercely opposed to physical pieces of real estate in the land of Israel, and I've seen this with my own eyes. I've had rocks thrown at me. I've been in a rock throwing. We've had rocks through our windows. I've had death threats. I've been in Arab villages undercover. I've had my face posted up on Arab social media and my phone number. We've interviewed Arab mayors, caught them in their lies on camera. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen the empty houses that CNN tries to show you about the poor Palestinians. It's not true. 100,000 illegal structures that are empty, because they receive billions of dollars from the European Union and the United States every single year. Except they don't live there, because they're fleeing to America, South America, and all over the world. These are the lies I've seen personally with my own eyes. You keep traveling down the road of the patriarchs, you come to Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood for 369 years. You can go visit the archaeological site where the tabernacle stood. You can pick up pottery off the ground that's 3,000 plus years old. You can imagine the Jewish people camping out on the hills around the tabernacle for the feast 3 times a year. You could keep going down the road and come to the site of Beit El, Bethel, Jacob's dream, where he laid his head on a rock and he had a dream. Highway 60 goes straight through Jerusalem. You come out into Judea and you visit the caves where David ran from King Saul, fleeing for his life, where he wrote some of the Psalms, where Amos had his prophecies, where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, Leah are buried in the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron. These are all places in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. You know what else is in this area? Most of the Dead Sea. The Qumran caves. A lot of people don't realize this. The entire center of the country of Israel is Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel, and the world is trying to give this away. They're trying to eradicate it. The entire world's trying to do this. And when the Palestinians say they want their own state, they don't want this land. You know what they want? The entire land of Israel. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You ever heard of that? That's the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which is the entirety of the land of Israel. And if you ask them, what about the Jewish people? Where do they go? I don't care. Let them go back to Poland is what they say. Or if they're bold enough, they just say, maybe they just should throw themselves into the sea. Be done with it. Be gone. So when I went to Israel at a young age, I was challenged in my faith. I grew in my faith. My Bible came alive. It became 3D. I caught vision and direction for my life. And so my challenge is always to young people and for parents and grandparents to instill that in young people. Go to the land of Israel. Hear from God. It's a local call, by the way. God still speaks. The rocks are still talking in Israel. And see what God has for your life. Whether he calls you to serve in the land of Israel like he did me, whether he calls you some other part of the world, but to take the reality of the restoration of God's kingdom that's happening there today and all around the world to the nations. Changed my life. So 20 years ago exactly, my father-in-law, Tommy Waller, went to the land of Israel for the first time in 2004. We just had his 20th anniversary when he first stepped off an airplane. He knew God was calling him to Israel. He just didn't know what, where, how, why, when. Didn't know any of it. But he had an invitation to tag along with some businessmen, and he went to Israel. While he was there, he went to the north, south, went everywhere, the Golan, the desert, met dozens and dozens of people. But one day, he's invited to this place called the Mount of Blessing. And he's introduced to a farmer, Nir Levi, an Orthodox Jew. And Nir Levi takes him to the edge of his vineyard, and he stands there looking at his very young, newly planted vineyard, and he reads him the words of Jeremiah 31:5. You will again plant vineyards on the mountains of Samaria. The planters will plant so much that it will end up being ordinary, common food. There'll be so much of it. And when he heard this passage of a prophet, a very sad prophet, who's watching Jerusalem in flames, his people being dragged away in chains when they were taken captive to Babylon. And yet he speaks this prophecy and this vision that one day life will come back to the mountains of Israel. 3,000 years later, he's looking at the physical manifestation of that actual prophecy. Growing up, I never knew that prophecy was a real thing that could happen. I thought it was all spiritual. When you go to Israel, spiritual becomes physical. Where prophecy meets reality. And he turned to this man and he said, I'm in. I want to help. What do you need? So he packed up his family of 11 children. 11 children. I don't know if y'all heard that. I come from a family of 8, so between my wife and I, there's how many grandchildren? 45 grandchildren and counting. And they went to Israel. They started helping this farmer harvest grapes, harvest olives, prune vines, plant vines, anything they could do to help. And after a year, some friends came along, and then some friends of friends, and then before you know it, 75 people showed up at once. Then 300 people showed up at once. And today, we've had more than 3,000 Christians from 30-something countries come to the land of Israel to bless and serve the Jewish people through our physical hands and our physical actions. And it's all through the physical restoration of God's kingdom through the land coming back to life. So many of the prophets talk about agriculture. So many of them talk about the land coming back to life. Ezekiel 36 says, "You, O mountains of Israel, shall shoot forth your branches and blossom and bloom because my people are coming home." For 2,000 years, the land of Israel was desolate. The Jewish people came home like prophecy foretold, and the land burst into life. There were a lot of hard blood, sweat, and tears, but the land came to life. The land of Israel responded to their people coming home. It never responded for any other people that way. They had to have a massive movement of the Jewish people returning home, and the land responded by bursting forth into bloom. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, Zechariah. Just start reading them and start highlighting where it talks about Israel, where it talks about the mountains, where it talks about the land. You'll see it too. I have so many scriptures highlighted. We could spend 2 hours reading them all. But then we realize prophets don't just talk about the land. They talk about the people, and they also talk about somebody else, the nations. Because they say the nations will come and participate in the restoration of God's kingdom in the land of Israel. Isaiah even says foreigners will come and be your plowmen and your vine dressers. They'll come tend your herds, your flocks. We were doing that without even realizing that Isaiah said it was going to happen. We realized later. This is a fulfillment of prophecy. The prophets talk about the nations helping to bring the Jewish people home. The nations coming up to Jerusalem to worship God at the feast. The nations coming and putting their hands and feet in the soil of Israel. The nations supporting the Jewish people there, investing in our... my favorite verse in all of the prophets is Isaiah 52:7. "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns." For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have known nothing but death and persecution from those who claimed to carry our Messiah's name. The Jewish people have experienced pogroms, Spanish inquisitions, crusades, being kicked out of country after country after country. The Holocaust, Martin Luther spewing out lies and destruction against the Jewish people. Adolf Hitler saying, "I'm only here to finish the work that Martin Luther started." Hitler professed to be a born-again Christian. Now we know he wasn't. We know all of those things were not who Yeshua was. They were not real, those things were not really representing our faith. But guess what? We have an opportunity and an invitation to make reparations for that. And it would be one thing to go and say, "Listen, we're sorry, we repent. A lot of bad things were done. That's not who we are." That's one step. Or we could go and we could physically stand and we could say, "Listen, we're not here to say anything. We're not here to change you. We're not here to convert you. We're not here to say kiss the cross or die. We're just here to serve because we're different. We're not here to change you at all. What can we do to help? We want to bless and serve through our physical actions, just like our Messiah served, to serve and not to be served." And so every year now, our team and hundreds of volunteers, the rack cards that you got, one side is our main ministry website with our volunteer programs and our tours every year. We have about 7 to 8 tours and volunteer programs every year. We plant thousands of trees. We harvest hundreds of tons of grapes. We plant vineyards. We prune vineyards. This past year, we actually saved an olive harvest in Israel that was going to waste because all of the men were away fighting in Gaza and Lebanon, and all the workers from Thailand had gone home because of the war. We were able to go in and save the olive harvest, which then gets exported to Europe because there's an olive oil shortage in Spain, believe it or not. Now we're building things in the land of Israel. We're clearing roads. We're helping with security. We're putting in cameras, putting in fences. The small Jewish communities and the small Jewish farms in Judea and Samaria, we were able to help 50 farmers last year every year we're doing more and more and more. But it's because of you and so many other people all over the world who are standing with that. Adam mentioned Operation Itai, which is our initiative started after October 7th. We were blown away. This is far above and beyond everything we've ever done before to bring in thousands of protective vests and helmets and flashlights and drones and binoculars and thermal and night vision gear, drones, security cameras, installing gates, so many different things, but it's all to protect and equip the Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria. There's 500,000 Jews living across the Green Line. The Green Line is where you go from Judea and Samaria to Tel Aviv. Most people are too afraid to cross the Green Line. We are too. It's dangerous in Tel Aviv. That was a joke. But it's time that the world doesn't just wave the Israeli flag. It's time that the world doesn't just go to Israel. It's time to get off the tour bus. And none of those things are bad. They're all needed. But we can't stop at waving the flag. We can't stop at praying. We can't stop at giving. We have to go and put our feet there physically. And if you can't do that, you can help send somebody else. And if you can't financially send someone else, you can inspire somebody to go. You can tell your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, your friends, your community. You can stand up for Israel here in America, which is more and more needed every single day. But we have to do something physically. And I'm going to challenge you to do more than just pray or give. What kind of action can you take? Because it was 2,000 years worth of actions that destroyed our relationship with the Jewish people in Israel. I hope it's not going to take another 2,000 years of actions to repair that. But it does take action, not just words. We have to use our hands and our feet. So I challenge all of you. Come to the land of Israel. Check out what we do. Please consider coming to Nashville next week. If anybody wants to drop everything you're doing and come there. Check out what we're doing. We put out videos, podcasts, articles every single day. Like I said, we're trying to break through the fog of propaganda, fake news, anti-Israel media to tell what's really happening. Because we see it every single day. And the challenge now is for us just to get that message out to you. So check that out at the Israel Guys. And like I said, this is already speaking to the choir. I know you guys are already physically taking action and standing with Israel. So thank you so much for doing that. And I just urge you, stay strong. The Jewish people are with you. They want to stand. They want to stand together. So the time is now to do that. I'm going to ask Ryan to come up quickly. He's going to close us out. It's just a personal testimony of him going to the land, and then we'll be finished. Thank you, guys. It's been such a blessing to be here. We appreciate your prayers.